Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Real Spiritual Talk Radio. I am your host, Lamont Gates. Joining me today on this episode is near-death experiencer, Mr. Randy Sheifer. Randy, welcome to Real Spiritual Talk Radio.
Oh, thank you for so much for having me on today, Lamont. It's going to be a real honor to share my message on your station. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I understand, Randy, you not only had one near-death experience, but you had three near-death experiences, as well as a very odd spiritual occurrence where you were able to deliver a message to someone. Is that true?
That is true. Yes.
All right.
Well, we're a complete stranger.
So we're all ears here on Real Spiritual Talk Radio. But before we get into your near-death experience account, why don't we go backwards a little bit and get historically acquainted with your religious and or spiritual belief systems? What was it that you were raised in, for example? What did you learn as a child about religion and or spirituality, or possibly believed on the topic?
You know, that is a very good question, and I'm glad you started with that because growing up, we had very little religious education. When I was small, my family, I can remember my mom and dad attending church pretty regularly. But then when we moved, they couldn't seem to find a church where we were living in South Florida at the time that either they liked or they felt comfortable with, or just was different from their church back up in Pennsylvania. So slowly they just stopped going to church. And I mentioned this before or in my book that religion really kind of took a background. We didn't pray. We didn't, have grace at dinner time. God drifted away. I didn't think about him often as a teenager growing up. Yes, I occasionally attended a sunrise service over on the beach, Easter morning or Sunday morning, whenever they have it. But that was primarily at the request of a girlfriend that I was probably trying to impress. And it's about the only time that I attended church. So I didn't have a strong background religiously growing up, not at all.
Okay, and so did any of that change as you got older on your own, when you got out on your own, or did it pretty much stay the same?
It changed after I got married. My wife is a lifelong Catholic, and when she moved from New York to South Florida, her mother had a falling out with the Catholic Church, and they stopped going to church altogether as well. But she had gone to Catholic school, and conversations that you have as a teenager was somewhat had faith. And then when we had our own kids, her wishes were that they would attend have a Catholic education. So we were living in Ohio at the time, and we found a Catholic church that we were comfortable with, and we started to go regularly to Catholic church. And my feelings at that time were, wow, this is where I need to be. These people are, right on. Their customs and beliefs and the way the church is designed and all of the robes that the priest wears and the symbolism. I said, this has got to be, got to be closer to God in some way doing all of this. So I actually went through their Rite of Adult Education, RCI, and became a Catholic. But, going to church for me, I was just going through the motions. I wanted to believe that there was a heaven and that there was a God. I really did. I truly wanted to believe that, but I had no faith in believing that. And I retired with 30 plus years in the law enforcement field. And my world, for those 30 years, all evolved around physical evidence. You know, I was a criminal investigator, and my specialty was in death investigation of all things. And I could investigate someone else's death very easily, but I certainly could not talk about my own death. So my world revolved around that physical evidence. You know, to if it was a suicide or homicide, whatever it may be, I always had to find the physical evidence to link the crime to the person. And that was my world. And when I went to church, I just didn't find that evidence. I didn't find what I needed to me to grow in my faith with the church. And so, yeah, I would think about my own death when it actually go into full-fledged panic attacks. I mean, just lose total control. I'd be yelling and screaming and, you know, no, God, please don't, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. So I had a real difficult relationship with God. I wanted to believe, but I had no evidence that it truly existed until
And of
my
course,
near-death experience.
yeah, I was just going to say, of course, this all changed after you had your near death experience. So, why don't we walk through that uh, event? Why don't you tell us what it was that caused your near death experiences, as I know you had three?
Yeah, I contracted the COVID-19 virus, in March of 2020, and I became very sick very quickly. I had gone to my family practice doctor, and he looked at me and just kind of blew me off, if you will, and just said, you know, oh, you've got the flu, go home and rest, come back in a week if you don't feel better. And I went to him twice, and he is now my former doctor. I no longer go to him. But, you know, in looking back, you know, COVID was in a very early stages in March of 2020, where I live in Northwest Florida. The first case in our area wasn't until around the 10th or the 15th of March. And this was the 26th of March when I was admitted to the hospital. And I was admitted because I had bilateral pneumonia, and my pulse oxygen rate was down in the low 80s. It was actually 82, and normal is 95 and above. So I was admitted in critical condition. I didn't know that at the time, but they quickly put me on oxygen and up into the ICU ward. And I lasted about 2 days until I maxed out the ventilator, or I'm sorry, I maxed out the oxygen. And they did a emergency intubation and put me on a ventilator at that time. And then they care flighted me from the hospital that I was in into to a larger hospital, not too far away from us, where I was put onto a ECMO machine. It's actually a heart-lung bypass. They put a tube into my right jugular vein that went down into my heart and basically was removing the blood from my body, oxygenating it, and putting it back in. And I wasn't on the ECMO machine but 24 hours before I went into kidney failure and had to start dialysis. And soon after that, my liver started to throw off high enzymes and blood clots, and my right atrium of my heart enlarged, and they were really concerned with congestive heart failure. And so being on the ECMO machine also helped my heart, you know, took some of the work off of my heart and my lungs to try to get them to heal. And then I had my right lung collapse. It collapsed on me. My lungs were completely filled with COVID. They were just from a white, cloudy looking lungs from top to bottom, just saturated with COVID. So it was during that time they actually called my family up and told them what condition I was in. They gave me a 3% chance of survival and suggested that they may prepare for my demise. And it's annotated in my medical records. They were talking about my potential demise. So they really expected me to die. And that happened somewhere between, or my near-death experiences happened somewhere between March, I'd say the 28th when I was intubated, up until that Easter Good Friday, which I think was the 10th or 11th of April. So the three of them happened sometime within that time period. And then after, on the 10th of March, everything changed. My family was able to get the hospital to give me convalescent plasma. And I was the first person in Northwest Florida and the 34th person in the nation to receive convalescent plasma. And I just recently found out that at one of my cardiac exams, that I was the first first COVID patient to be put on ECMO, and I was the first COVID ECMO patient to survive. And I contributed to receiving the convalescent plasma. They gave it to me on that Good Friday. By Easter Sunday, they were able to cap the ECMO machine. That means they were able to turn it off. My lungs started to function fully. My heart decreased and started operating completely. And by that Easter Monday, they surgically removed totally removed me off the ECMO machine. And I think it was Wednesday or Thursday that week that they were able to remove me off dialysis. And I pretty much went from almost dying to completely healing after receiving that convalescent plasma.
However, in between all of that, you had some sort of experience. Why don't you tell us what that was like?
Yeah, I certainly did. I did some traveling, Lamont. I remember my consciousness waking up. And I say my consciousness because I had no feeling of being in a body. It was just, what I could see, what I could hear, what I felt things, you could feel things. So my consciousness awoke in a dark tunnel. And I was moving, not real quickly through the dark tunnel, but I was moving through this dark tunnel. I had no idea where I was. Because remember, my religious education, I had no clue. We didn't talk about God. We didn't talk about heaven. We didn't talk about any of that. So I had no clue where I was. And the tunnel had small windows periodically down both sides of this tunnel. And there was a warm light. There was a very bright light outside that almost wrapped around this tunnel. I could feel its warmth inside the tunnel. And as I moved through, I knew I was dead. I remember clearly saying to myself, "You must have died." And typically that would have thrown me into a panic attack, but I was very much at peace. I was very calm, there was no anxiety, no nervousness. I just felt this warmth that felt almost a loving warmth and so peaceful traveling through this tunnel. And I came out of the end of the tunnel and I was in this beautiful, magnificent hall. This was absolutely gorgeous. And it was a gold hall and it had big archways. I think I remember four of them, two on each side of these archways that looked, maybe they branched off and went into another area of this building, but they were absolutely beautiful. They were all the hallways, they were arched in gold plating, and there was huge chandeliers hanging down from the ceiling, just beautiful crystal chandeliers. And I remember seeing 2 or 3 fountains in this room as well. And it was just absolutely a gorgeous room, big stained glass windows, all decorated in different colors. And it was just a magnificent, beautiful, beautiful building. And I was standing there, and I was actually on a mezzanine looking into this building down onto the floor. And I couldn't see anybody. I saw no one, but I could feel that there was other people around. I could feel that people were down on that floor doing something, and that was very confusing to me. And then I see a gentleman walking up to me, and I remember him only kind of from the waist up, and he was kind of a middle-aged gentleman. He had long hair and a beard, and I commented to him about how magnificent this room was, and he said, yes, it's a very, it's one of our original rooms, he said. And he then looked at me and he says, you're not supposed to be here. You have to leave. And he pointed to these big, beautiful oak doors. They're off to my left-hand side. And I walked over to those magnificent doors. They were just all carved, magnificent looking, beautiful oak doors, and I pushed them open, and I entered into a city, just a beautiful, beautiful city, very clean and meticulously kept. I mean, there was no cars or automobiles or anything like that. It was fairly quiet in this city, and I walked down 3 or 4 steps, and again, I didn't have a body, but I remember going down these 3 or 4 steps, and I started to walk down this road. But the road wasn't like asphalt that we have here. It was almost, I think the color I used was almost like a pearl looking color, and it was almost translucent. It was so beautiful. And the buildings were very, very, very tall, all in glass with, gold outlines up the building. And I walked past parks. The parks were beautifully maintained. The green of the grass was just so bright and vibrant. There was beautiful flowers and trees in this park. And again, I could feel people there. I could feel people in the park, but I couldn't see anybody. I just thought it was me. So I continued to walk, and all of a sudden I started to get very scared. My whole demeanor changed because I started where I was feeling very calm and relaxed and at peace before, I started to get very scared. And I said, oh my God, how am I going to find my way back? How am I going to find my way back to that room? I'm lost. And I started to get scared, and I was very tired from walking, and I was just exhausted. And I sat down on the curb, and I was sitting there and calling out, please help me, I'm lost, help me. And these people were walking by, not that I could see, but I could feel other spirits, if you will, walking by, but I wasn't allowed to see them. And I couldn't figure out why no one was helping me. And I remember then just in a kind of a panic saying, oh, I'm so lost, what am I going to do? And I looked over to my behind my left side there, and all of a sudden I saw this beautiful white staircase going all the way up into the sky. As far as you could see, this white staircase rose up. And I thought to myself, if I can get under that staircase, maybe if I can get high enough, somebody will find me. So I remember crawling up this staircase, literally crawling because I was so exhausted and tired. And I don't know how far I got up, but I remember a voice, and it was just a voice only. He came on and he said, there's Randy. There he is. Get him. It was almost like someone grabbed me by the back of my shirt collar and whisked me right off of those steps. I just flew right off the steps, and I went back into I call it my dark, sedated world. Everything just went black on me again. I can only think that I returned. My spirit returned to my body because I wasn't supposed to be there, And that actually happened twice. And I have no idea what came first, second, or third on the 3. So But I found myself back in that same city, and but in a very different location, just as beautiful. Um, and I, I went through the tunnel, came out again into this different area of this city, and I started walking around again, just taking it all in, and just was at all because, like I said, I knew I was dead, but it was so beautiful and calming and peaceful. It was such a surreal feeling, it was just absolutely beautiful feeling. But as I got further into the city, I got scared again. I got into an area and I started to get scared and started the feeling that I was lost and I needed to find my way out. And I kept walking, but I couldn't find my way out. And then I remembered those steps. I can find my way to those steps where I was found the first time. Maybe I can get found again. So I did that. I made my way back to these steps. And I remember getting there and clinging to the steps, and I started my way up. And this time I saw the person. I saw this face appear. And it was an older gentleman, kind of white hair, long white hair with a beard, and he had a beautiful white robe on. And again, he said, "There he is, there's Randy, get him." And again, whisked me right off the steps, right back into my little dark, sedated world. I was gone. So that scenario played out twice in two different parts of that beautiful, beautiful city that I was in. My third one is the one that I cherish telling the most. Somehow I was selected to bring back a message for an individual, and I don't know why I was selected, but it was very humbling, and I certainly was not worthy of this man's giving me this message. But I remember, they're not necessarily going through the tunnel, but I remember awakening almost into a void of nothingness. It wasn't completely pitch black. It was, I call it kind of late dusk, still a little bit able to see, but very, very dark. And I'm looking around knowing that I died, but not knowing where I was. And I could not see this person, but I felt the presence of someone next to me, some spirit probably that I couldn't see. And I remember seeing orbs of light flashing by me. Some had human forms. Some of them were just little orbs of light going in every direction around me. And I call him my spirit guide, indicated to me that he didn't say anything, but he indicated to me that I needed to follow him. Telepathically, he communicated with me and was just follow me. So I did. My consciousness started to follow this spirit into this void. And we went, it wasn't long before we were walking or moving through this void that, Lamont, you've been to the theater and you're sitting there with a dark stage, and then very slowly a light comes on and suddenly illuminates the actor on the stage. And that happened. I was moving along and I saw this light, very dim light, starting to come on to my left-hand side. And it got brighter and brighter and it kind of flashed on all at once. And I saw my deceased mother-in-law sitting there. Beautiful, beautiful lady. And she had on this white gown of some sort, just this beautiful white gown. And she was sitting on a seat next to like a bar of some sort. And she was sitting very regally, very straight and very proper and regal. And her hair was all pulled up and she had a beautiful white ribbon around her hair. And I called out her name. I said, Dolores, Dolores. And she looked at me briefly, but then she looked away. And she wouldn't communicate with me. She wouldn't acknowledge my presence. But she was absolutely beautiful. And I saw her just as clear as day, just as clear as I'm sitting here looking at, look at my wife across the table, just as clear as I could see her. And my deceased brother-in-law ran by, much younger, probably late teens, maybe early 20s. He died of a drug overdose in his mid-30s. And he ran by. He didn't acknowledge his mother. He didn't acknowledge me. He was a bit of a character in life. And I expect he's a bit of a character up in heaven too, because he, just ran by all of us and didn't say a word or didn't look or anything. So my spirit guide indicated we needed to move on. And as we did, that light, I remember that light above my mother-in-law slowly dimming off, turning off and slowly dimming down until she just disappeared into the darkness. And remember, I had orbs kind of coming all around me still. And we moved deeper into this void. And I suddenly felt that there was some type of a barrier between, or something in front of us, some type of a barrier in front of us. And I believe now that it was the veil of death. And that very well could be why she didn't want to acknowledge my presence, because she didn't want me to pass through that veil. And again, off in front of me, way off in the distance in front of me, this dim light came back on, and it got brighter and brighter. And I was some distance away, but I saw and I felt my deceased father, my deceased mother, and my deceased sister all standing there. I could not see them as clearly as I saw my mother-in-law. I wish I did, but I knew it was them, and I called out to them, "Dad, Mom, it's me, Gina, it's me." And no one acknowledged me. They didn't look at me. Well, they looked at me briefly. My dad was the first one to look away. And then my mother and my sister slowly turned their backs to me as well. And they would not acknowledge me. But I continued to yell for them to try to get their attention. And I can only think that veil is what separated us, that they could not talk to me at all. So my spirit guide indicated we needed to move. And we moved on, and again, that light slowly dimmed out and they disappeared into the darkness. But at that same time, I saw this light, this very bright light. And let me say one thing. It seems up in heaven when you're in this position, you can almost see 360 degrees. You're not limited by any peripheral vision, because this light was way off to my right-hand side, but I could see it. It was almost behind me, but I could clearly see this light moving at me at a good rate of speed. And he came up from my right-hand side, and as he got closer, I did not recognize this person. Had no clue who he was. But I'm a military veteran. I did 20 years in the Air Force. But I felt, Lamont, it was such a warm feeling that I just knew that this man was a veteran. I just knew that he was a fellow veteran. And he came up to me, and the man had a slender face and dark hair and a mustache. And he literally stopped right in front of me, maybe a couple of feet away. And he didn't, he actually spoke this time. It wasn't telepathic communication. He actually spoke to me. And he said, "Tell Madison at the salon her grandfather's okay." And he moved on. He moved on off to my left-hand side. And he went into just an orb of light in a human figure. And he went onto a white porch of some sort. but everything was white. The steps, the banisters, railings, everything was white. And he sat down next to another orb of light. And he started to make red, white, and blue ribbons and American flags. And it wasn't shortly after that, probably what felt like seconds anyway, because you have no reference to time. My spirit guide told me telepathically, time to go, that I had to go. And I was gone. I came back into my very dark, sedated world. So right around May the 4th, I was in the hospital, mind you, from March 26th, and I got discharged on May the 8th. And the last week that I was there, they finally allowed one of my daughters, who's the nurse, they allowed her to come into my room. And she was the first person I saw in my family for 45 days. So you can imagine it was a pretty emotional reunion between the two of us. And I didn't tell anybody about these experiences, none of the doctors or nurses or anybody, because at that time I was just trying to figure out what happened to me, you know. In my mind, I remember just repeating these scenarios. And I had dreams. I know my dreams. My dreams all contain people that are still living, my family and friends and people that are all still alive. And I had hallucinations, no doubt. Those dancing panda bears on the ceiling were a hallucination, you know. But then I had this other area of my near-death experiences, and I was able to label those. Not too long ago, just recently. And I had this other area that what happened to me? Where was I? What did I experience? You know. So when my daughter came in, Lisa, I told her what I had been through. I told her my dreams. I told her my hallucinations. And then I said, Lisa, I don't know what happened or where I went. I said, I was traveled somewhere. And I told her about these three as best I could. Certainly not with the language that I'm using today, because I've gotten somewhat educated on near-death experiences, you know, but at the time I had no idea. And she said, Dad, who's Madison? I said, I don't know Madison. I have no idea who Madison is. And she says, well, who's the man that told you this? I said, Lisa, I don't have a clue. I don't know him. And she goes, you never use the word salon. She said, I think that's the first time I've ever heard you say that word. And I said, yeah, it's always a barber shop or always, you know, a hairdresser for my wife. And she says, how are you going to find her? And I said, well, I don't know, but a veteran honored me with this message. And I feel like I have to make an attempt to find this person, you know? So on May the 8th, I was finally able to come home. And of course, I had to learn to walk again, and I had to learn to swallow. And because I was intubated with a tube down my throat for so long, I have some vocal cord issues. And so I came home and I was in my wheelchair, and I was rooting around in my dresser for something. And I found this card to a local barbershop here in town. And I hadn't had a haircut in, you know, probably about 8 or 9 weeks by then. And for me, it was rather long. And I brought the card out and I gave it to Lisa. And because Lisa, when I got real sick, Lisa quit her job in Mississippi and moved home to take care of me. And I said, Lisa, could you call down to this barbershop and see what they're doing for COVID, you know, even if they're open or how they're doing, and make me an appointment. I said, I'd like to get my hair cut. So I wheeled myself back into the bedroom and not thinking anything of it. She follows me in and she said, Dad, where did you get this card? And I said, well, I must have picked it up there some time ago. And she said, how long have you had it? And I said, I don't know. I said, it's been in my dresser drawer, I guess. I don't know. I just found it. And I said, why all the 50 questions? And she said, have you looked at this card? And I said, Lisa, just get to it. What are you trying to say? And she says, Dad, and she handed the card back to me. She said, Dad, look at the card. And I looked on the card, and here written on the card was the name Madison Logan. She says, Dad, I think we found your Madison. And I said, that's insane. That's crazy. And I said, well, call down and see if they have a Madison working there, and make me an appointment with her. So she did. And I couldn't drive, obviously, so Lisa went with me to the hair appointment, and we had to wait outside. They were making everybody wait inside until you had an appointment, but I guess they saw the old guy with a walker and felt sorry for me, so they invited my daughter and I in to sit down. And I told Lisa, I said, which one do you think is Madison? And she goes, I don't know. She says, you don't know her? And I said, no. I said, all the girls here look familiar. I said, I've been in this barbershop before. I said, they probably all cut my hair at one time, you know. And it wasn't long before this one young girl, probably in her mid-20s, dark hair, walks up and she says, you know, Mr. Sheifer, are you ready? And I said, oh, are you Madison? And she goes, yeah, I'm Madison. So we went back and she sat down and, you know, started to cut my hair. And my daughter started to tell her how sick I was and what I had gone through. And I said, Madison, I said, can I ask you some personal questions? And she said, sure, you know, I don't mind. And I said, are both your grandfathers still alive? And she says, no. She said, my favorite grandfather, the one that I was closest with, passed away just a little less than a year ago. And I said, oh, I said, did he live locally? Did he live here in Florida? And she goes, oh, no, he was from Iowa. She said he lived in Iowa his whole life, you know. And I said, oh, I said, Madison, and was he a veteran? And she goes, oh, yeah. She said, I'm pretty sure he was. He always talked about the Vietnam War. And she said, I think that he was in the Army. And I said, oh. I said, Madison, I said, I think your grandfather approached me, and he has a message for you. And I told her, I said, Madison, I said, your grandfather told me, tell Madison at the salon that he is okay. Your grandfather is okay. And of course, she started to cry. I'm crying. Lisa's crying. The people in the barbershop are all looking at themselves saying, don't go to that girl. She makes you cry, you know. And so we calmed down, and I said, Madison, I said, your grandfather, once he said that to me, he moved over to a white porch. I said, is that white porch significant? And she said, well, that would have been his home in Iowa, had a white porch. And he loved sitting on that porch. And once he retired, he'd sit out there every day and watch cars and people go by, you know, and he just loved sitting on that white porch. So I said, Madison, I said, he was making red, white, and blue ribbons and flags. I said, is that significant in some way? Lamont, she took a step back, and her eyes got as big as saucers, crying. And she said, he belonged to the American Legion. And he was every Veterans Day, our whole family would go down to the American Legion and help make red, white, and blue ribbons and American flags to put on the veterans' graves. So not only did I have that communication, I was able to validate it. I mean, everything he showed me.
I was just going to say, you had, you truly went on a spiritual ride here with your 3 near-death experiences, and then what we also call an after-death communication, or an ADC, whereas this individual who was deceased had a message for his granddaughter, and you were used as the catalyst for that. And as you correctly stated just now, you have also verification that you met with a deceased individual during your near-death experience. Wow.
I did not know him. I did not know his family. I did not know that he was, I think maybe I drove through Iowa possibly once, you know, Had no idea who this family was. Now I do. We're pretty close now. Madison and I are, obviously become closer, and I've talked to her grandmother as well. And she sent me a picture of John. That was the spirit's name, John. And he was in his late teens or maybe early 20s in a military uniform when he was in Vietnam. And she sent it to me. And I had to call her up right away. And I called her and I said, Kathy, this is John. This is who I saw. This is who I saw. And it absolutely is mind-boggling to me that somehow, and to me, how else would he know that? Either when you're in heaven, you're all knowing, or he's been in that salon, and he saw me with Madison. So he knew that I knew Madison remotely. He knew I knew Madison before I knew I knew Madison, but somehow he knew, and he picked me, to communicate to his granddaughter, and I cannot think of a greater honor than that.
I would have to agree with you. Not only mind-boggling, but mind-blowing. Why don't
Yeah.
you tell us? Many near-death experiencers come back with perhaps after effects. An example would be precognition. Some of them lack the fear of death. Some of them are more sensitive to nature, more empathetic. Did you come back with any of these?
Oh, I tell you, I'm much more empathetic. I'm much more of a calmer person. I'm very calm, very spiritual now. I no longer fear death. That panic attacks that I used to go into, and it's a funny thing. I never discussed that with my wife. She did not know about those panic attacks until after my NDE, and I came back and was able to share with her those feelings that I had been going through. And we've been married 48 years, and she thought she knew everything about me, but I was holding back, But yeah, I no longer fear death because I know that your spirit lives on, So we're in this body temporarily. It's like you had said, I'm a conduit for this message. This body is a conduit for me, and I will return. I will return home someday when my time is right. It wasn't, and God's blessed me with not only the peace of knowing death. He provided that evidence for me, that physical evidence for me that I needed to know that life exists after death. He knew that I needed that, and he provided that to me in this form of Madison's story. And it's a beautiful story. Madison and her family are just a beautiful, beautiful family. And John died very suddenly of a heart attack, and in the house. And I don't think the family was able to say a proper goodbye, And this is the second time that Kathy, his wife, received a communication from John. Second time he's communicated with her that he is okay. So he is a quite persistent little spirit up there. He wants to let the family know that he is safe. And but even my wife and my daughters, our relationship with my wife and my relationship with my children and my son-in-law have gotten much better. Has gotten so deeper now than it was before, because I can talk to them about religion, and I can talk to them about God, and share these experiences, and I don't feel uncomfortable. Prior to this, I never discussed it. Never discussed it. It just was a topic that we avoided, And it was just because of my not feeling comfortable, that uncomfortable feeling that I had, talking about it. That's all. And it's just, I hate to say this because COVID was a terrible, terrible, horrifying disease. It is, still is. And I know it has taken millions and millions of lives. But when I see what COVID has done for me, COVID saved my life. It has saved my life. And I know that it's a difficult, hard thing to say because when I was in the hospital, people were dying around me. I found out later, obviously, but there was 2 other people with COVID on that same, not the same ECMO machine. They were on different machines, but they were still on ECMO. Both of them died. I'm the only one that lived. And I never felt that I was ever deserving for that such grace that he has given me. That, I
Well,
couldn't be
obviously,
blessed more.
it brought you into a higher dimension of spiritual enlightenment that you can definitely use and will be beneficial to you for a long time now.
Oh, rest of my life. Yeah. However, God lets me here for the rest of my life, but I don't fear meeting him again. That's for sure.
I understand you are also writing a book. What is the title of this book, and
Ah,
where can we find it when it's completed?
yeah. Hopefully we're going to have it out. Hopefully by the end of the year, maybe the beginning of next year, if everything can go right. It's called Surviving COVID-19, to the Veil and Back. So it tells a little bit of my history, how I grew up, and how I developed my religious beliefs, or the lack of my religious beliefs, and some of the why I developed those. And it talks about our family and the things that we did and my near-death experiences. So it's been a healing experience for me to be able to write that. It really has. And my daughters, my 3 daughters, and my wife are all contributing to the book as well. So it will have their feelings of what they felt like when Dad was laying up in the hospital with a 3% chance of surviving. So
Well, yeah, and it sounds fascinating. When it's completed, please let us all know. Randy, with that said, I want to thank you for coming on Real Spiritual Talk Radio and sharing your extremely fascinating account.
thank you so much for having me. Again, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Lamont. I appreciate it. Thank you. And God
Thank
bless.
you. Ladies and gentlemen, Randy Sheifer.